And I'm grinding till I'm tired.
Since the early ages of the world, we have records of gangs forming and acting as channels of negotiation, supremacy, political influence, and brotherhood. In India, by the year 1200, gangs known as thugs had their own rituals, hand signs, and ethical codes separate from and highly disputed by the general public. In later centuries, pirates, thug disciples, and Middle Eastern thieves utilized the group mentality and created gangs similar to the Indian thugs, and acted en masse to create havoc or obtain power. Gangs evolved through time as these groups continued to gain authority in their own regions of the world, and as their influence spread to other nations. Gangs and gang leaders came to power, such as Jesse James, Billy the Kid, Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, and the 5 Points Gang. As the 19th century progressed, street gangs flourished, and as the 1960s approached, interracial and African American gangs became more and more prevalent. White supremacist groups, such as the KKK, became more popular again in lieu of the apartheid issues of the era. In the 1970s and 80s, as technology improved and communication was simplified, gangs from each of these major cities were able to spread their influence and messages more effectively, forming national chains and extensions of their gangs.
My name is Nicole Robinson. I'm a history teacher at Granger High School. A lot of the gang activity here is kind of subversive. You have to know it to really see it. On occasion, you'll see kids flashing gang signs. This year I've had students flash gang signs in my classroom across the room from one another. A lot of it is color-based, where kids are like, no, I don't want you to write in blue on the board, you should write in red on the board. And I think unless you're somebody that knows what's going on, most teachers would be like, okay, so they don't like blue. But the reality is that I think most students here, even if they're not actively participating in a gang, they have some sort of gang affiliation. I think because it gives them a sense of family. A lot of kids' parents are working very hard and aren't able to maybe monitor them as much as they would like to. But what we're starting to see are second and third generation gang members, where parents were involved in a gang and now the kids are involved in a gang. So it's something that I don't see going away, and I think as you have an influx of new people moving into Utah, especially from California and other states that have larger gang problems, it's bringing the problem here. I had one student that was a gang member who didn't want the other kids to know that he was really intelligent and that he wanted to succeed in school, but that wasn't the cool thing to do. And so every day he would take his homework and he would smash it up and throw it in the garbage can. And every day I would dig his homework out of the garbage can and I would grade it, but I wouldn't tell anybody else in the class, so that he knew what his grade was and I knew what his grade was, but he was still able to maintain his, sense of cool or whatever in terms of being able to do that. I've also dealt with a lot of gang violence. I've had a few students that have been murdered as a result of gang violence, which is very, very difficult. And I think one thing to remember is that a lot of times we kind of stereotype gang members, and we think that they, they're those thugs, those kids that are always in trouble, and that's not necessarily true. The other thing is that gangs in Utah are not necessarily race-based. In many other parts of the country, in order to be in a particular gang, you have to be Hispanic, or you have to be black, or you have to be this or that. Here in Utah, it's pretty fluid, where you can be a member of any ethnic group and be involved in a gang. Some of the other groups that maybe aren't necessarily known as gangs or for gang violence are actually pretty active, and those would be your juggalos and your straight edgers. Honestly, not much, because I don't think I've ever had a parent come to me and say, I'm real worried about gangs at the school, I'm real worried about my kid's safety. I haven't ever really had that, and I don't know if it's that the parents don't really understand what's going on, or they don't care, or they're just too busy to get involved.
Does that concern you at all?
Definitely. I think the number one thing that can help kids stay out of gangs is a strong family unit. And if they have parents that are involved, that are checking their grades, that are coming to the school to see what's going on, it helps to build a new sense of community. Because that's what you have with a lot of gangs, is it's a way for kids to create communities. And they need that, and they can have those communities, but they need to understand how they can do it in a positive way rather than a way that's going to cause violence or get them in further trouble. My second year teaching at Granite High School, I was a teacher at Granite when Bernardo Repreza was murdered. It happened on Halloween night. He was murdered by some straight edge kids on State Street. That was a really rough one, simply because the media gets involved and they try and make kids out to be angels or devils. And the reality is that both of the parties involved in that were in the wrong, but it resulted in the death of a 16-year-old kid. I've had a couple of other students, one student that was walking home from school who was hit over the head with a baseball bat, ended up in a coma for several months and then eventually died. It's tough. What I see a lot of times is parents and communities in denial. They don't want to admit that they have a problem. They don't want to admit that maybe when the kids are at church on Sunday, they're planning gang activities. They're not doing church stuff. And there's often that misnomer of, well, my kid's a good student. My kid goes to church every Sunday. My kid does this. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to get sucked in. And so I think the thing that's difficult for me is just seeing this sense of denial where people want to say, yeah, we know it's out there, but it's not my kid. And the reality is you've got to be on your kid. You need to check their cell phone records. You need to see who they're texting. You need to find out who they're hanging out with on Friday and Saturday night. And what I find is that with a lot of my kids that are in gangs, they don't have a curfew. They don't have parents that are monitoring them all the time. And because they don't have that family structure, that feeling of somebody that loves and cares about them, they turn to another group of people that's going to accept them, that's going to love them, that's going to take care of them and have a loyalty to them. And so when you see broken families, parents that are divorced, parents, kids who've had a parent die or something like that, what often happens is they'll turn to this other unit in order to find support. And it used to be when I was in high school, they were cliques. The thing now is that the cliques are a lot more organized and have a tendency to be violent and commit criminal acts.
I'm a certified police officer, and I work for the county, the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office, and I'm on loan to the Metro Gang Unit. I've had as young as 8, but the average age to join a gang is probably 14 or 15. I would say they stay in the gang for upwards of 18, 19, but we're talking about the less of the majority. Some stay, there's two things when you interview a gang member, and that's I'll do this until I'm dead or I'm in prison, and that often happens. But some do see the light, some do mentor out, or some, no, it's I don't know what word I'm thinking of, but some people just see the light or see where it's gotten their friends, or that they lose their friendship when they go to the detention center, juvenile detention center. Where are my friends now, or that kind of stuff.
How do you do that?
So initiations would be, they'd be beaten in certain gangs have a certain amount of seconds where they're beat in, 13, 14, which is the predominant here, 13 seconds or 14 seconds. There are also females that are sexually assaulted into the gang, with all or majority of the leadership in the gangs. And then to get out, same process. Some gangs, kids are told you don't get out unless you die out, but other gangs, the same initiation, but